So we'll move on to the next event. I invite Professor Shalina Mehta to take over.
Thank you, Professor Gregory. Professor Kalam, our apologies to you that the session got delayed by about 8 minutes or so. I take this opportunity to welcome a very close dear friend, renowned scholar, a distinguished writer, Professor Kalam, to talk to us today about what he calls as shifting horizons, themes and issues in migration issues. He believes that though today human beings are found all over the world and in outer space too at times, we do not in general think much about not in general think much about their origin and spread. That is their migrations. If at all something or anything can be indigenous and native in the context of any place in the world, then it has to be only the land and most of the floral and faunal biodiversity that particular region or country. Not so human beings. So then we may have to think of Homo sapiens as being exotic to most spaces except for the locale in which they originated. Well, we as anthropologists often talked about the the communities that we started studying as exotica and assumed that some of them were actually the autochthones or the original inhabitants of those areas. So right at the outset, he breaks the myth and says there are really no autochthones, and human species should not be audacious to assume that there are any such, a kind of a sagacity to it that they belong to a particular region or place. Dr. Kalam has a distinguished career. He is currently a visiting professor at International Institute of Migration Development, Thiruvananthapuram, as also at Center for Economic and Social Studies, Hyderabad. Besides, he is a distinguished fellow at the Peninsula Foundation, a think tank in Chennai, an honorary professor designate at the Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Hyderabad. He was Dean, School of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences, and Professor of Anthropology, SRM University, Amravati, Andhra Pradesh. He is the founding Dean, Administration and Regulatory Affairs and Professor of Anthropology at Kriya University, Shri City, Andhra Pradesh. Prior to that, he was Professor of Applied Social Sciences, Adjunct Faculty at Loyola Institute of Business Administration, Professor of Eminence, and the founding head of the Department of Social Work at Tejpur Central University. Professor and head Department of Anthropology and Chairperson, School of Social Sciences, University of Madras. Dr. Kalam has had a long-standing association with the French Institute Pondicherry in various capacities and has collaborated with French and Indian scholars in joint researches, publications, and seminars and conferences at the French Institute Pondicherry. He was a founding member of the Monitoring Committee of French Institutes in India. He's been, to say, to highlight some of his just few of his achievements. He was a Rockefeller Resident Fellow at Duke University, Human Rights Fellow, for which he continues to fight in his popular writings and various newspapers. Human Rights Fellow at Harvard University, Commonwealth Academic Staff Fellow at the London School of Economics, University of Paris, France, Mission de Sciences de Homs, Paris, France, visiting professor, Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla. His research was on family and land tenure among the Kurks in Karnataka, and then he went on to study sacred groves and other issues in Kodki. There is a lot more, but I simply don't want to stand between his distinguished academic career and what he is going to say and talk to us today. I can only say that what he's going to speak about is something that concerns all of us, particularly in this changing global world order. There are lots and lots of questions. I just want to add that probably there is nothing exotica, neither the fauna or the flora or the human species. We are all migrating constantly from one place to other. Dr. Kalam, all yours. Looking forward to listening to your brilliant presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta. Am I audible? Is it okay?
Yes, absolutely. And are you sharing your screen? You have any PowerPoint?
No, I won't be sharing the screen. I'll just be speaking.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please.
Am I visible too also?
Yes, very much. You look handsome as ever.
Yeah, fine. Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Mehta, for the kind words and also for introducing me in such a affectionate manner. Good evening, and I thank the organizers for inviting me to deliver this lecture. I consider this a very humble exercise in something where I would like to share a bit about what I have been making in terms of modest attempts to understand the field of migrations. But the larger goal is to learn from you all through the interactions which will follow after I make this presentation. Here is something I believe strongly, and that is social scientists. And today we are all, I think most of us are anthropologists. I do believe that we can come together for academic purposes, irrespective of platform on which we participate. And institutional differences or ideological underpinnings can indeed be offset through dialogue, not by keeping away. So from that point of view, I consider this as a kind of a short preamble to what I'm going to say today. And the participation here, I thank all the people who have gathered here from different cities in India. I don't know if there are some from abroad also, but thanks a lot for doing that. Now, going by the knowledge that we have acquired subsequent to the results of the Human Genome Project, and which includes, in a way, the Out of Africa theory, all of early Homo sapiens history, or later, for instance, is a continuous saga of migrations. Now, the Human Genome Project has subsequent genomic studies have transformed our understanding of human history, providing molecular evidence that confirms Africa as the birthplace of Homo sapiens and detailing the roots of our expansion across the globe. By analyzing the genetic variations in modern human and ancient DNA, researchers have mapped out of Africa migration, which occurred approximately 60,000, 1 lakh years. Now, this could vary depending on certain new things happening and the way people interpret, but generally, let's take it as 60,000 to 1 lakh years. Now, the title of my lecture, which begins with Shifting Horizons, what I'm trying to point out is that indeed there have been changes in our understanding of the field of ancient and prehistoric events concerning Homo sapiens. One of the most significant developments has been in fact, the overriding of what was earlier known as even today is known as the multi-regional hypothesis or the multi-origin theory. Now, the traditional, in a way, classic multi-regional hypothesis or multi-regional theory was that it posits that Homo sapiens evolved simultaneously in multiple regions of the world from Homo erectus, and today it's not considered valid by majority of the scientists. Probably there are people, and there will always be people who have a different point of view. Does not go into that. But then the point is that the kind of developments which have come about as a result of that does not happen. Therefore, but a simple understanding of what I'm trying to say in terms of multi-region theory is that the hypothesis is invalid as a model for primary origin of Homo sapiens, but it's valid in that modern humans contain a legacy of admixture from different archaic regional groups. So that much is something I think we need to clarify. Now, recently on January 18, during the literary festivals which have been going on in multiple ways in different parts of the country, an author called Laura Spinney was giving an interview to the Hindu newspaper. And on January 18th, I'm quoting her, she said the arrival a decade or two ago of a new discipline, namely paleogenetics, with its ability to extract and analyze ancient DNA, has transformed this story. What it has meant is that we can now trace migrations of prehistoric people. We can track people through space and time before historical records documented where they were going and what they were doing. So now we have another window on that prehistoric world. Since there is very often a correlation between prehistoric migration routes and the diasporas of languages, the way that language families branch as people migrate and their dialects get separated, mean that those two sources of knowledge together are extremely powerful. It helps us with the third part of the puzzle, archaeology, to fill this picture. Now, what happens as a result of the Genome Project and the new developments has been that three things have become very important. There are other things, but in the main, I will talk about three. One will refer to three things. One is genetics and the paleogenetics, as Laura has been talking about. Then archaeology, of course, and then some, which means fossil evidence and other kind of evidence in terms of tools and other things which have come up. And languages. Now, that is something which earlier wasn't given much importance to. Languages were not given. Therefore, when Laura is using the term diasporas of languages, the word diaspora is her usage. I do not normally use the word diaspora, and I will explain later as to the reasons why I may not be or why I do not use the word diaspora. Therefore, this quotation was from Laura, and where by paleogenetics, what we are talking about is that we are talking about the analysis of DNA, specifically ancient DNA, there's aDNA, extracted from fossils, bones, teeth, hair, and soft tissue. So this bridges biology and archaeology to trace evolutionary history, population movements, domestication and diseases. Paleogenetics uses advanced sequencing technologies to reconstruct rather than recreate genomes of extinct or ancient organisms. So in a sense, what we are talking about from this in terms of the Genome Project and the development has been that anthropology in a way has turned into molecular science, showing that all modern humans are, in quotation, are a tangled bush of genetic relationships. I will repeat that. Anthropology has turned into a molecular science, showing that all modern humans are a, in quotes, tangled bush of genetic relationships rather than isolated branches. Now, one of the persons I was quite impressed by in terms of some of his new writings, which concerns all of us and also the talk today, has been a person called Amitabh Ghosh. Now, most of you may know Amitabh Ghosh only as a writer or a novelist, but then he has had an interesting kind of a background. And we had an association in the past because Amitabh Ghosh got his MA from the Department of Anthropology in the Delhi School of Economics, where I was for some time. And also we lived in the same hostel in Delhi University. There's the Goyal Hall. Now, he's not just a novelist. He has a doctorate degree in anthropology from Oxford University. And after finishing his master's, he got this INLAX fellowship to go to Oxford. He learned Arabic in Tunisia, and his PhD fieldwork was in Egypt, where he brought out this marvelous book in an antique land. Now, what I'm quoting, two short sentences from Amitabh Ghosh, comes from his recent book, one of the recent books, because he's a prolific writer, The Nutmeg's Curse, Parables for a Planet in Crisis. Now, one of the quotes from page 221 of Nutmeg's Curse is, I will read a part of it, except for one small part of Africa, nowhere on earth can people be said to be truly native, in the sense of having come into being on that soil. I will repeat, except for a small part of Africa, nowhere on earth can people be said to be truly native, in the sense of having come into being on that soil. Now, this is something very crucial for many people when we are talking about soil or earth or land, because soil or land is crucial to lots of people in many different ways. To the tiller or a cultivator, it has a different meaning. But it also has pride for people who talk about their nativity or Janmabhoomi in a sense. Now, in spite of the Janmabhoomi, people do not live there. Most of them today they don't. And lots of people do not live where they were born. But they also have this aspect of Karma Bhoomi, which also becomes important to people. And then they keep going back to the Janmabhoomi, that is, the going back home quite often. Now, this is something comes from my fieldwork among the South Asians in England and other places. One of the first things which happens is that when people are single early migrants, and if they die, their kin and the friends and the kindred which is there, or the bradri which is there, they try to send the body home. Now, in all initial migration situations, we find when people are single or migrants or in a small number, the attempt is to send the body home so that it gets buried where they were born. Now, this becomes a very significant issue when people who work with migrations look at it in a deeper kind of a way, where each migrant or each migrant group, for instance, and I call this in my work as a critical demographic scale, CDS. Now, when a group of people who have migrated, doesn't matter whether it's internal migration or international migration, people cross the seas, do not cross the sea or cross land border. Once people go and live in another place, and then this becomes a kind of a critical demographic scale when it's reached, that is a certain number of points. I mean, this may differ from place to place. In some places, it may happen when people are 5,000, and sometimes some places it may happen when people are 50,000. That is, once the critical demographic scale is reached and the numbers are sufficiently large, reproduction starts happening locally rather than from the places where they were born. So, which means reproduction is in the migrated to place rather than in places. Then local burials start taking place. Now, this is something very, very which can be clearly seen from one of the work which I did with South Asians in England at a place called Bradford. And Bradford is famous for one of the another thing is that was the place where in around 91 or something, Salman Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses, was burned for the first time. I mean, it happened in different places, but that was one of the things which happened there. So in Bradford, you can see as to how these things have happened. There were single male migrants. They stayed in one lodge kind of a thing, which later was converted into a mosque, in fact. Okay. So then at that time, the endeavor was to send the body back home. Now, gradually, when they settled down, when the FAB brought in 1960s, when there were restrictions, instead of being single migrants, they started living there. This happened to, of course, before independence, they were all together from the subcontinent. And then in 1947, they became Indians, Pakistanis. Then in 1971, they became Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis. So this kind of schism, which took place because of events happening back home, not necessarily there. So the kind of schism which comes in and the settlement patterns start changing in this place because of the events which were taking place at home. So that's one of the things which is important as to how the land is so important to people in spite of the fact that they have gone over to another country or live in another state in the country, but they want the body to be sent back home. And they also want to show that the body has to be cared for when they die. And this relationship with land is something which comes about in different ways in novels, in even anthropological works in terms of what kind of relationship. So irrespective of who a person is, whether it is a teacher or a migrant from one place to another, a cultivator or not, the kind of reverence they have for the land is completely different. Now, the second part, which I'm taking up again from Amitav Ghosh in the same book, Nutmeg's Curse, is this small sentence. Again, this is a small quotation. It is rather the vitality of the place itself that creates commonalities between the people who dwell in it, no matter what their origin. Now, what Amitabh is trying to say here is that when people live in a given kind of a locale and cohabit the same place, the vitality of the place, that is his term, vitality of the place creates commonalities between the people who dwell that small area. Now, no matter what their origin. Now, this is a very significant point that he's trying to make. But later we will see over time what it also have over time in this place where they have developed some commonalities, there can also be differences. Now those differences happen particularly because of people having had these commonalities in different places and develop them, congregate in another place, that migration happens. So over time, it leads to different kinds of issues when people who have already developed various kinds of commonalities have differences and cohabit in another locale. Now, that's when the interpersonal relations get affected. And later, I will talk about 3 examples as to how these kind of problems come up between people in terms of the international relations, interpersonal relations. And those 3 examples would be one from India, the other one is from Germany, and the third one is from the United States. Now, besides Amitabh Ghosh, the other works that I have been impressed by and have, in fact, gone deeper into that has been, the other one is Early Indians by Tony Joseph. This is one of the, I think, I believe every anthropologist, physical anthropologist, social anthropologist, physical, social, antisocial, whatever, I feel they have to read this, Early Indians. Now, the second one, which came up much recently, about a year back or something, this is edited by 2 of my good friends, Ganesh Devi and Ravi Korishettar, and also Tony Joseph, with whom I have correspondence. I have not met Tony Joseph personally, but Ravi Korishettar and Ganesh Devi, of course. Now, the title of the book is The Indians, simple. Okay, it's edited by these 3 people. Now, the other work, which is very important, and all my 3 examples that I will be talking about later come from this book, and this is Isabel Wilkerson, a black author from the United States, very, very popular. And the title of the book is Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. Now, this is something which is a very good work. And again, I feel that irrespective of your background, whether an anthropologist or not, you still have to look at this book by Isabel Wilkerson, which is Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents. Now, taking the genetic evidence, other disciplines such as archaeology and linguistics and the other things taken together, one of the ways in which we can look at the whole history of migrations from the beginning, it could be classified, and Tony Joseph has also talked about it, and classified into 4 classes of migrations. Now, the first class of migration began around 70,000 years ago. That's when we are talking about Africa, when a group of modern humans left the African continent and moved to the Arabian Peninsula, and then went on to people the rest of the world. Now, rest of the world includes both the New World and the Old World. We'll come to that in a bit. The last continent they reached was the Americas, first the North one, and then subsequently the South one. And it's likely that they got there more than only 16,000 years ago. So, which means before 16,000 years, both North America and South America did not have any human population at all. So between 70,000 years ago and over 16,000 years ago, when most of the world got populated by modern humans, and by modern humans, I'm talking specifically anatomically modern humans, that's Homo sapiens, sapiens. That's the proper nomenclature to be given. Homo sapiens, sapiens is the right one, but short we use Homo sapiens. That's all. We don't go to the second sapiens. Now, the modern world, the world got populated by anatomically modern human beings. That is, they came out of Africa. That was the first part, about 70,000 years ago when the first migration started. Now, the second class of prehistoric migrations happened slightly later. I mean, much later, in fact, when the glacial period had ended about 12,000 years ago. When some of the modern human populations took to agriculture, that's about 10 to 12,000 years back, in different parts of the world. Not every group took to agriculture at the same time. Now, that's important. There's a range, in fact, in terms of time as to how agriculture was adopted in different parts of the world where humans have started going. So those who are in situations enable them to the different kinds of cultivations which happened. So I will not go into the details, but just to say that wherever modern humans took to cereal cultivation, what followed was population explosion. Compared to, say, for instance, if somebody was doing other kinds of minor things like tubers, yams, bananas, and the other things, wherever cereal cultivation took place, population explosion starts from that point. So after people settled down to farm, they found increase in productivity, human fertility going up, and their numbers started rising dramatically, leading to migrations. Now, one of the things which happens in migrations is also the density of population. So this can also be called as the farming-related migration, or also sometimes as the Neolithic migrations. And this left quite strong marks on demography in most places. So the migrations from West Asia, where people had gone up already, which took farming to Europe from there, and migrations originating from China also came to the Austronesian places, where the Austronesian languages give some evidence to that. That's maritime Southeast Asia, Madagascar, and the islands of Pacific Ocean about 5,000 years ago. Now, the third class of prehistoric migration happened where modern humans, that is anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, came over to Central Asia. They took up the art of metallurgy, or indulged in metallurgy and weaponry and wheels, wagons. And once you have wheels and wagons, then the domestication of horses also started around the same time or slightly earlier. Now, what happens as a result of having wheels and domestication and wagons is that mobility becomes faster than what it was earlier. Therefore, the mobility which happened as a result of the invention and domestication of invention of metallurgy, or indulging metallurgy, weaponry, and horses, wheels and wagons, was that mobility started becoming much faster than what it was earlier. So this set of migrations affected a large part of Eurasia, from the farthest reaches of Europe to West Asia, then to South Asia and China. Now, this can be also called as the Bronze Age migrations. Now, the three classes of migrations, by and large, happened in the prehistoric period, or writing had become a common practice, maybe at the end of or sometime around the end of the third kind of phase of migrations, which was happening. But prior to that, we have to look at it mostly from the point of view of prehistory. So the fourth class of migrations, driven by historic forces, took place in the last few centuries, quite recent, in fact, when modern humans figured out how to cross vast oceans and invented steamships that helped them sail around the world quickly and create colonies. Now, navigation is something which we have to look at it as something which happened as a result of the given local environment and ecology in different places at different point in time. We don't have to look at navigation and use of ships first, wooden kind of things which happened, and then later steam, when it was when they could tap steam and find out the power of steam, they went into steamship. So this is not something which you always have to think about diffuse from one place to another. Simultaneous kind of springing up of ideas happened in many different places, and given the ecology and environment of having water, for instance, around you, you figure out how to travel, and then how to overcome the tides and the other things which are there. So this happened simultaneously. Now, this also had global impact and changed the democracy in major and minor ways in different parts of the world. Now, besides India, there have been lots of other places where colonialism has happened as a result of also migrations. Australia, America, both North America and South America were the places. And then these two places, the important thing compared to what happened via colonialism in India is that the demography of Australia and America changed drastically because of the large number of people who went there. Indian demography did not get affected in any way compared to Australia and America because the number of people who came as colonialists was significantly very small. And this particular, because the colonists who arrived here were too small relative to the large population which India had. Therefore, the kind of impact which colonialism and migration of people has happened in Australia and America is and both Americas, North and South, is completely different compared to what happened in India, because in India we didn't have the significant numbers to change the local population or the local demography. So what we have here is that we have Homo sapiens who are indigenous, endemic to only a small part of Africa from where they evolved. And then we had Homo sapiens which go to different parts of the world, and in the true sense of the word, in fact, populate the world. Only Earth and, as I said earlier in my abstract, happened. And the places from where they exited Africa, two places are normally taken as the important place. One is known as the Djibouti, and the other one is the Eritrea on the African east coast. That is, for us, it's the west, going from our Indian Ocean and going from our Arabian Sea, it's on our west, but then the east coast of Africa was something. And there's a place from where it happened, and is known as the Bab el-Mandeb, which is a strait, S-T-R-A-I-T, strait. So the migrations occurred in the ancient world without any need. This is something, I think, if we look at it in terms of the movements of people today and what happens to them in terms of when they want to migrate, compared with that, at that time, there were no hindrances, there were no roadblocks, no holds barred of any kind. Gradual and indeed, of course, terribly slow pace as it was because all of them, before they discovered wagon and the wheels and the horse, it was quite slow. Walking was the way it happened. But there were no encumbrances of any kind. If somebody wanted to go from one place to another, they just went there. So there were no hassles of international borders, because there were no countries as such, no passport, no visa, no customs regulations, no quarantine, no dumping of people in detention centers, whether you take Trump into consideration or not. No centers, there are no forced migrants or asylum seekers of any kind. People just moved, only at the glacial pace, but then they did move. Now, what we are talking about, if you look at 60,000 years or 70,000 years when people started coming out and all, what we are talking about in terms of generations, if you take up, normally 25 years is considered as one generation in demography. So if we take that as a kind of a starting point, what we are talking about in terms of people having moved from place to place from 60, 70,000 years back, that we're talking about 2,500 generations. Now, what all you find in the world, in different parts of the world today, taking a small group of people who all looked alike, the phenotype was the same, physiognomy was the same. There is no difference in terms of the DNA or what DNA or whatever. That group of people, over a period of 2,500 generations, have given rise to what the world looks like today. So in India, for instance, on the entire subcontinent, there were no humans. So subsequent to that, all who came to India, to the subcontinent, they're all foreigners in a way. There are aliens that have come from elsewhere. So at that point, when the southern route migration started, one of the ways in which people populated the subcontinent, we didn't have anybody. But then the whole thing happens, the entire story of human development, human settlements, human migrations is confined to 2,500. Give or take plus 50, 60 or 100, even 100 generations, but roughly 2,500. So when we look at contemporary human societies, divided and distributed as they are into continents and countries, and undoubtedly various cultural regions, zones within most of the countries, we come across a multitude of ethnic groups, and each one has its own culture, language, religions, customs, traditions, and above all, different physiognomic or phenotypic looks. Now, this phenotypic look is something is quite crucial, because on the basis of that, so many things happen today. DNA-wise, maybe there is no difference at all internally if you look at the human beings, but because the face value, when you look at somebody, you place the person in terms of what the person looks like. Now, that is the one which has given rise to so many things. Now, all this happened between 6,000 to 10,000 years. Before 6,000 to 10,000 years, all the people who had migrated from out of Africa people. They settled in different places. They all look the same. So depending on the kind of intensity of the sun, for instance, you go to the North Pole, you don't need the melanin pigment that you have in Africa. Therefore, the melanin pigment reduces. And as a result of that, people start getting fairer, their eye color changes, the hair color changes, the physics changes, and so many different things which have change among them. So the immense diversity and heterogeneity which you look at today, which we get today, is not only in terms of the cultural institutions, the social institutions, the social practice of the people, and also the diversity and heterogeneity and phenotypical facts, how people look. Now, as I alluded to things by saying that I will be taking up 3 examples, and how much of time do I have, Dr. Shalini?
Please go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Now, the 3 examples that I'm taking up, and as I said, Isabel Wilkerson has influenced my thinking on this. India, Germany, and USA. Now, in all 3 places, discrimination and exploitations have happened. And they're different in terms of how they have happened, why they have happened. And the 3 things that we take in terms of discrimination, exploitation, and whatever you have in terms of how one group looks at another or treats another group has happened in 3 places, these 3 areas, zones in different way. In India, we have the Dalits, discrimination and exploitation of those who cohabit with them in multi-caste habitations. And remember this is something important, because compared to the tribals, for instance, who have also been discriminated and exploited in different ways, if you cohabit an area, the exploitation and the nature of exploitation is different from being separate and being isolated in a hill area or in a forest area. Therefore, the Dalit discrimination which happens, or the problem of the Dalit, the exploitation of the Dalit, it happens in places where there has been cohabitation. Now, cultural traits between the different groups who inhabit in the same locality with the Dalits, the cultural traits are all post-migration. That is, the indigenous populations that we talk about today are all post-migration. All the differences which came about between them have happened not in Africa, they have happened much later in different places. All of you are familiar with what happens to the Dalits, has happened to the Dalits historically, and what's happening to them today in terms of different things. I won't go into the details of that, but I will allude to the next example that I have. The persecution and subsequent, first persecution, a systematic subjugation of the Jews in Germany was a central state-sponsored policy of the Nazi regime, particularly between 1933 to 1945. Now, this process involved the systematic stripping of rights, economic disenfranchisement, social isolation, and ultimately the deportation and murder of German Jews during the Holocaust. Now, while some of the Jews, now I'm trying to make this comparison because in India, we can talk about the populations cohabiting in a way today as indigenous. But in the case of the Jews, some of the Jews moved to Germany from Eastern Europe in the late 19th and early 20th century. And a large portion of the community was fully assimilated. I'm using the word very cautiously. Assimilated. They were German speaking and considered themselves to the native to the land. So we have 2 different situations. In India, the Dalits among the others is a different situation. And here the Jews among the Nazis. And Hitler considered at one point to be a Christian. He was baptized as a Catholic. But then later he had problems with that. He wrote, and then he had differences with Christianity itself. But the point is that the Jews were different from Hitler and his followers, and that's why the Nazi regime did all kinds of things to them. So, but these were people who were not completely indigenous to Germany in the sense that the Dalits were, and they had migrated from different places. And there were a large number of people who were there in Germany. And 33 to 45, when Hitler died, was the worst period for them, the Holocaust and the different kinds of things which were done to them. So this was the second thing which happened. So the people who are involved at one point, of course, they were all together in terms of when they left Africa, but then the changes which brought about them lead also to interpersonal kind of things which happen. Now, the third example comes from America. Now, most of you would be shocked if you read Isabel Wilkerson in terms of the kind of treatment that the blacks were subjected to by the whites, particularly in the southern states of the United States. There was no United States at that time, North America, the southern states which were there in North America. So the first African slaves were taken to North America, were taken to Virginia in August 1619. That's more than 400 years, right? August 1619, and a ship landed at a place called Old Point Comfort in Jamestown with about 20 captives. Now, where were the captives from? They were from the West African coast, Senegal, and the other places which are there. While this marked the beginning of slavery in English North America, enslaved people were present in other Spanish-controlled areas such as Florida as early as 1526. But remember, these people who are trying to enslave, capture the people from Africa and take them over to North America were the who? They were the people who had migrated from Africa, settled down in Europe, and then they had changed themselves. So this period, which was there in terms of what was happening to the blacks, was how the term black came up is also interesting, happened under what is known in general as the Jim Crow laws. Now, the Jim Crow laws, which were open in terms of how they were practiced, was the system of state and local statutes that enforced racial segregation, a disenfranchisement in the southern United States from the post-Civil War era until roughly 1968. Now, 1968 is considered to be the time when certain things changed in America and people started getting more rights, but then that doesn't matter a lot. And why it doesn't matter a lot, I will come to that later. But then all of you know that we are talking about people who are the slaves taken from. Now, these, what are known the Jim Crow laws, were considered to be separate, of course, but then they also argued that they're equal and mandated separate status for African Americans overtly, manifestly, which in practice meant inferior public facilities, schools, and transportation. Now, it used to describe specific legal period of systematic racism which was happening. So those of you who are interested, I think, can read more on the Jim Crow laws, and it's quite revealing as to what happened. So it is considered as a racial slur to use the term in a historical or educational context to describe this era of systemic racism. Now, the era largely ended with Civil Rights Act of 1964 in the modern United States and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 or 66, sometime later. Now, if we look at the three situations, the Dalit situation, the German situation, and the American situation, except in the case of the blacks, differences had come in among the migrants phenotypically, as also as regards various ethnic markers post of Africa. But those who stayed back in Africa, they remained what they were. There was no change. So the change happened only for those who had left Africa, gone over and populated different places of the world. And those who remained in Africa remained what they were at the time of out of Africa. So, but when the Africans were enslaved and taken to America, it was being done by those. So the enslavement of the Africans from the West Coast was being done by those who were no doubt their remote descendants, having left Africa and changed physically by lightening their skins and technologically, culturally differing in different ways. So those who enslaved the people from Africa and took them there were only the descendants of the people who are being taken today, their ancestors being taken. So they had settled down in Europe, that is, those who were enslaving them, had migrated to the New World, that's from Europe, that had gone over to from Virginia and other places to the United States or the North America at that time, made things difficult first to the Native Americans who were there. So the Native Americans, I'm using the term native in quotes because they were there only from 16 or 17,000 years back. And this is something important. The Native Americans, or those who are considered Native Americans today, went there from where? From Russia and then towards the United States. And if you look at the world map as a flat thing, you find Russia on the right and America on the left, and it looks as if there's a lot of distance. But look at the globe. When you look at the globe, the distance between Russia and North America, where the present Alaska is only about 80 kilometers. And during winter, the entire thing freezes and people move around, and animals move around. And then that's how the migration to North America happened. Now, Alaska was till, I think, 1867 was with Russia. They sold it to the Americans around 1860s or 1867. And therefore, you see Alaska not connected with the United States mainland. The other one, of course, is Hawaii, which is not connected. So Alaska is completely different from that point of view. And then from there, you come over to Canada and then move over to the United States. So the migration happened from that. So 16,000 years back, when the Europeans went over to North America, they first subjugated, drew away the Native Americans, who also were their ancestors, though a bit remote. And then those who were being enslaved from the west coast of Africa, were also the ancestors in a way. So they were being taken to alien lands, mainly to toil on the plantations that those were taken from Africa. Now, in their own locales, these Africans, wherever they are, the entire continent, in their own locales, the Africans are known as, and also were known at the earlier only by the name or designation of their groups and societies. Like they have the self-defining terms for themselves in terms of what tribe they are, what group they are. But by taking and shifting them to America, they got the new appellation called blacks. In Africa, they didn't have this term. In Africa, they were who they were in terms of belonging to a group of people or a society who had their own names. Now, as compared to the Dalit and the Jewish context, what makes the situation of the blacks terrible, horrible, and worst in terms of human relations all over the world is the color factor. If you are black 24/7. There is no escape from that. On the other hand, if you are in India, say for instance, you belong to a village or a town and you are a Dalit, and first-hand knowledge of who you are is known to the other people. But when you move to a city, you do all the things which people dwell in the city do because the label is not going with you. Your face value or label value or your tag is not traveling with you. The same with Jews. Unless they're known as Jews, they will not be prosecuted. And that's the problem which happened in Germany, because they were identified, and then the problem started with them. Therefore, if you look at the Dalits and the Jews, the situation is completely different. But the problem which comes up is for the blacks, there is no anonymity. There is anonymity for the Dalits when they move out from the places that they were born or where they normally dwell. And there can be anonymity even for the Jews, unless the name or some other marker is there. Otherwise, physically, phenotypically, they look almost the same. Therefore, that anonymity is not enjoyed by the blacks, unfortunately. And that's one of the worst things which continues to happen in the United States. If there is a shooting, the blacks are shot first. If there's any trouble, the blacks are there. And therefore, I recommend you to read Isabel Wilkerson's book, where she has minutely pointed out as to how being black means so many different things. You have a bus, you have a seat on the bus, you are a black, and therefore you're treated differently. If you're traveling in a flight, if you're in the first class also, like Wilkerson herself, she travels first class or business class always. She's so rich in terms of the work that she has done and the royalty that she gets. In spite of the fact that she's in the first class, she's discriminated in so many different ways. I won't go into the details of that. Now, the second point, I alluded earlier by saying that I'm not using the word diaspora. It was coming from Laura, whose quotation I was giving. So I have 2-3 different points here, and then I will end Professor Mehta. Okay, the first point is diaspora, how to use it. Now, arguably, the first academic work to use the term diaspora in its title happened in a 1989 publication, and the publication was The Sikh Diaspora, the title of the book. The Sikh Diaspora, Migration and Experience Beyond Punjab. Now, this is edited by Gerald Barrier and Vern A. Dusenberry, And this publication came out in 1989. Now, why I'm talking about this publication is because in 1989, March, the Sociological Bulletin, the Indian Sociological Society's publication, came out with a special issue on, the title was Indians Abroad. And I think Professor Jain has joined us. One of the authors in that volume is Professor Ravindra Jain, who has worked, in different places on Malaysians and Trinidad and other people. He also has an article in that. There are about 12 articles in that book. And out of the 12 articles, 1989 publication and March Sociological Bulletin, I think the volume is 39. Not even a single person, about 12 articles, including S.L. Sharma, who was the editor for that, issue editor for that. Not a single person out of the 12 uses the word diaspora anywhere in the entire volume. Okay, now the Oxford Dictionary refers to diaspora or talks about diaspora as the dispersion of Jews among the Gentiles, mainly in the 8th to 6th century BC. And the other thing which the dictionary alludes to is that the Jews dispersed in this way, they were known as the diaspora. Now, what happens is that 1989, as I said, this book does not talk about it. And one of the things which they're talking about when they're talking about diaspora is the diaspora are the people who are dispersed in different places. And then as a result of the dispersal, most of them wanted to go back to the homeland. Now, in 1991, there is an institute in Massachusetts, United States, known as the Zorian Institute. And the objective of the institute, and I'm quoting that from their blog, the objective of the Zorian Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts, is that they're trying to raise awareness on issues of human rights, universal human rights, genocide, and diaspora, and also homeland relations through academic work. This is the objective. Now, 1991, when this magazine or journal named Diaspora came up, subsequent to that, all the authors from India or elsewhere jumped the bandwagon. And they started using the word diaspora to talk about the migrants in different places. For instance, Indians abroad became Indian diaspora. And in 1994, the UGC wanted to set up a center for diaspora studies in some place. So they had a big conference in Hyderabad. I was invited because I had already been working among Indians overseas. Professor Jain was also there, Professor Biko Parikh was there, and quite a few people who were working on Indians abroad were invited to this conference in 1994. And in a personal conversation, Professor Jain tells me, Ravindra Jain tells me that the first time he started using the word diaspora was subsequent to this conference in 1994, which was there in Hyderabad. Now, around the same time, I wrote an article and it's published. Those of you who are interested can have a look at it. And the title of the article is The Diaspora Bandwagon or Indians Part of the Journey. I have reservations about the use of the term diaspora because of the fact that if you look at the Indians overseas today, nobody is interested, as we know, nobody is interested in coming back to India. Most of them who have gone abroad are there. Therefore, as we know, human societies in different climes and different historical contexts, they have migrated for whatever reason, because of either force or because of volition, due to religious, political, economic, environmental, whatever has happened. Now, this is in the context of Jewish situation is different. But then what is pertinent is that they all wanted to come back. Now, again, one of the reasons why I am reluctant, and around mid-90s, I had introduced a paper, I think arguably that's the first time in India, called Indians Overseas in the Anthropology department of Madras University for the master's course. And the title of the course was Indians Overseas. I did not use the word diaspora, but we discussed the word diaspora during the classes as to why it's appropriate or not appropriate. People are free to use depending on their inclination towards the concept. But those who are not comfortable with that can refrain from that. So between 2000, now this is another point why I have reservations about not using the word diaspora. Between 2011 and 24, a total of 20.6 lakh Indians have renounced their citizenship, with nearly half of them, that more than 10 lakhs, doing it during the last 5 years itself. So on an average, every year, 2 lakh to 2,50,000 Indians are revoking their passport, because India does not have a dual passport situation. If you want to adopt the citizenship of another country, you have to renounce your Indian passport. So recently during the parliament session, the official figures given were over 20 lakhs, that is 2.06 million, where people have been leaving it. So on an average, if the diaspora are the ones who have to look for a homeland and come back, like it happened in the case of the Jews, and Israel was done to create problems in the whole region of Middle East for the Palestinians and for the entire world. In fact, they were coming back home, and Indians are not coming back home. Therefore, I have reservations on the use of that term. And in connection with that, I can also say that there is a bit of a dispute. I was of the opinion, and I thought that it was Abid Hussain, who was also Padma Bhushan and ambassador to the United States, who had said this sentence. But then one of the other scholars who has been my colleague pointed out and said that it was not Abid Hussain, but I.G. Patel who had said this. But anyway, the point is that what was said was that Indians have their heart in India, but their money in Swiss banks. So you can figure out whether it was Abid Hussain or I.G. Patel, but that's what I'm saying. So this is in the context of talking about the diaspora. Is the term okay? Now, the other term which is mostly misunderstood is NRIs. NRI, the term is non-resident Indian. And to be an Indian, you have to hold an Indian passport. So only those who have an Indian passport and have been away from the country for 182 days, that's 6 months roughly, can be called as the NRIs if they come back and open an account or whatever they do. But the point is that non-resident Indians are Indians with an Indian passport who have been living abroad for 182 days. So this nomenclature is not to be misunderstood and used in general for anybody. Indians living in England, Indians living in America, even if they have an American passport or a British passport, you cannot call them as NRIs. They are not NRIs. Only Indians who have an Indian passport and away from the country for 180 days are NRIs. Now, the other term of contention which is there is OCI, that is Overseas Citizen of India. Now, this again is a very, very misleading kind of a thing. People who revoke Indian citizenship can apply for what is known as an OCI card. OCI card means Overseas Citizen of India card. Now, the point is that if you are an overseas citizen, how are you of India? You have nothing to do with India. If you are an overseas citizen, you are an overseas citizen. That's about it. You are a US citizen or Indian, British citizen or something. Earlier, the term which was used was PIO, that's person of Indian origin, which I thought was more appropriate. Now, in my writing, some of the writing that I have done criticizing this has been that OCI, that's Overseas Citizen of India, is not the right term to use. And therefore, I have been suggesting that we can use a term called OCI, which is already there, and add an O to the end. So which becomes OCIO, which would mean Overseas Citizen of Indian Origin. So that has not been done. Of course, nobody listens to anthropologists. Why should they? Even your own students don't listen to you. And some of the colleagues may listen to you like today they're doing. So in fact, what happens is that I felt PIO was a more appropriate term to talk about person of Indian origin, and to change that and to merge that with OCI. So if you have an OCI card, now there are two categories of persons who can have OCI card. The people who are relinquishing Indian citizenship. What they can do is that they have certain privileges, that the multiple entry visa they will get as a result of the card that they apply to. They can own assets and property, but not agricultural land or plantations. Plantations in India come under the Industries Act. Most people do not know this. So agricultural land and plantations cannot be bought by them. And then they can continue to hold such property if they held it before giving up Indian citizenship. But subsequent to giving up the Indian citizenship, you cannot buy agricultural land and plantation land. Of course, you cannot contest, or you cannot first vote or run for a public office or contest for that. Therefore, that's the thing. That's one category of OCI. Now, the other category of people who can give an OCI card are people, male or female, who is married to an Indian for 2 years, and the marriage has been, continuing for 2 years. For instance, I will give you one of my friends, Anthony Walker, who has worked extensively among the Todas in the Nilgiris in South India. He's married to an Indian currently for more than 2 years. And Anthony Walker is a British citizen, British passport. He holds an OCI card. So there are two categories of people who can have one. Ones who have relinquished Indian citizenship can, of course, get OCI card. And the others who can get it is if they're married to an Indian for at least 2 years, male or a female. Now, these are some of the terms I thought people are completely, many people know about it. And something still I thought maybe I have to clarify in order to go ahead. I'm sorry if I have taken a lot of time, Professor Mehta, but I think I will hold on and end at that point. I had a couple of more points, but then maybe they will come up in discussion. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being a nice, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kalam. Interesting, exciting, controversial, all at the same time. Lots to contest for and lots to admire and appreciate. But I'm not going to intervene here at this juncture. If Professor Jain is there, I would certainly like the audience to benefit from his intervention. Can you see him? Because I can't.
Let me check.
Professor Jain, are you there? No, I'm sorry, Professor Kalam, I don't see him.
No, just before my talk started, he said he had lost the link, and then I gave it back to him. I sent the link to him. I don't know what has happened. But he was very keen to join, and yesterday we had a long chat about the talk. And
yeah, I thought that would have really added lots to this particular presentation, but I don't see him.
No, but also what has happened is when we began, there were more people. Some have left for some reason.
Yeah, there are about now 49. There were 61 at that in the beginning. Professor Vijay Sahai, would you like to comment first? Professor Vijay Sahai?
Just a minute.
Yeah, Professor Sahai? Yes. Yes, please. Would you like to comment on what Professor Kalam has to say?
It is a wonderful lecture. I haven't ever met Professor Kalam, but I was thinking that I should meet him sometime somewhere. It was wonderful to listen to you, Professor Kalam. Although I'm also a social anthropologist. You too are, I hope. Although genomic study, you have so much said about it, but your basic in anthropology, you are social anthropologist. May I know from you?
I'm a social anthropologist. Yeah.
He's from the school, sir.
I'm also. And a lot of things which you have said, really, it appeared that some of my ideas with regard to this migration and a lot of things were already that I got some sort of confirmation that some of the ideas, because I was not a biological anthropologist, I have not been, but due to my interest, I read about mitochondrial DNA and multiple theory, all these things, were very much in my mind. Just one thing I would like a sort of clarification, if you could help me to clarify. See, I have some of my writings which are not put here before me, so I can't quote from there. But then the idea is that the southern part, southern peninsula, Indian peninsula, Deccan part particularly. Deccan part, long back, it was also the part of Africa, South Africa. If you see similar situations prevail. Whatever the prerequisite for prehistoric man, like river, fauna, rich flora, rock shelters, and stone, suitable stones for making stone tools, etc. These things are, I think, in Deccan land also available. Then what is the reason that any fossil we find mostly from Africa, not from India? What is the reason? Is it because of the crunch of the fund? Is it because of the crunch of the fund to explore? And I believe that those ecological conditions which are essential for the survival of prehistoric man, they are almost the same as it is in South Africa and in Deccan land. So this question always arose in my mind, but I didn't have any answer. That's why it's not a question, but it's sort of, if you can clarify. And many other things. After, when I was listening to you about the diaspora and Jews and how this term came, and interestingly, you have clarified a lot of things like NRI, overseas Indians. They are really wonderful things. But that point, if you can highlight something to...
Thanks a lot. I want to step into territory which I am not very sure of by talking about the connection of South India with South Africa. I won't go into that at all because I don't have proper kind of information or things like that. But then to say that we haven't known much about ancient Indians, that you talk about prehistoric Indians, but I would use the term archaic Indians, because prehistoric Indians could be even Homo sapiens. I mean, prehistoric humans could be even Homo sapiens. Therefore, the archaic human tools in India have been dated to 1.5 million years back at the Acheulean one, and goes to up to 385,000 years ago in the Middle Paleolithic. And that comes from two places in South India and other places also. One of the places in Tamil Nadu is known as Athirumpakkam, which gives evidence from Middle Paleolithic tools. And remember, I'm not talking about Homo sapiens, I'm talking about these Paleolithic tools made by archaic humans. And I will give you the list of archaic humans, but mostly Homo erectus. Let's leave it at that. So Athirumpakkam was one of the places in Tamil Nadu, and the Paleolithic tools can be dated back to 385,000 years. Now, the other places, Jwalapuram in Andhra Pradesh, which also has the Middle Paleolithic thing going back to about 3 lakh years kind of thing. And remember that Homo sapiens came to India only about 50 to 60,000 years back. And they, in fact, at some point, there is one of the things which is said that there was a confrontation between the Homo sapiens and the archaic. The other places besides Athirumpakkam in Tamil Nadu and Jwalapuram in Andhra Pradesh, in the Bhimbekta things which are there in Madhya Pradesh. Of course, I have listed some of these places. And then the Konkan area in Maharashtra. Now, when we talk about who were the archaic things, some of the archaic humans did not come to India. For instance, Neanderthals were not here. They were mostly in Europe. And the Denisovans, who were there mostly in Siberia, that's in Russia. And therefore, mostly, I think we're talking about Homo erectus. So I would talk about all that. And then there was also this thing called the Narmada human, which are also known as the Narmada man, which was discovered in 1982. And these hominins lived about 1.9 million and prior to 70,000 years back. Now, they were there. And there's also this thing which is called the ancient ancestral South Indians, which is something which we can talk about today. But then when we are talking about the archaic ones, the two that I talked about, I mean, the Bhimbekta, Konkan, Atirampakam, and then the Jwalapuram or the other things, and the Narmada fossil, which is there. Now, the genetic evidence which is there for is that modern humans in India may have interbred with or descendants of genetically diverse archaics, and to be discussed cousins. Now, that's something which is there. But then the archaic, the Homo sapiens who came to India are supposed to have interbred to some extent with the Neanderthals and possibly the Denisovans, but then that's something different. But then the main point is that the earlier assertion that you are making in terms of South India connected with South Africa, for me, that's a gray area. Thank you.
One more.
May I request Professor Walimbe to expand a little more? He's the one who's an expert on Narmada Man, and he's an archaeologist. Unless Professor Sahai, you have something else to ask. Professor Walimbe, would you like to come and comment on it? He's the expert.
No, I am not an expert on Narmada thing. That's a bookish knowledge, whatever I have, little knowledge I have. But I'm really, the statement Professor made about sending the dead body back home. And I don't know how far it is true in the protohistoric sense. When I say protohistoric, in the Neolithic, Chalcolithic, Harappan sense, because there are several examples of what we call as symbolic burial, where we don't get actual remains of the dead, but there is something symbolic. So sending the body back home, dead body back home, how much time it requires, how much distance is covered, and very difficult to understand. Appreciate. I mean, Professor can elaborate on that slightly.
I was specifically referring to the people I worked with, the South Asians in England. And this field work was carried out from 1992 onwards for first 1 year when I was with the London School of Economics. And after that, subsequent visits which are there. I'm not talking about what people did in the prehistoric or the earlier times. I was talking about people sending the body back home amongst people who are currently living and their ancestors. And this started from the 1940s when they jumped the ships.
Okay.
What I talked about.
Sorry, I misunderstood you.
No, 1947, they were all Indian. Then they became Pakistani and Bangladeshis and all. I was talking about the history specifically of those people. And if you take up in the modern times, even today, among those who have gone to the United States and all, as long as they were single or they were very few in number, the bodies through earlier, as far as I know, all the bodies from India and Pakistan which were sent back from Bradford happened in about a day because of the flights which were there. Therefore,
I mean,
later they started doing local burials when the numbers went up.
I probably misunderstood you.
That's what I talk about, the critical demographic scale.
Okay, fine. Okay.
Yes, that point is well appreciated. I think all those who are living abroad do want their bodies to be back here. I see two more hands, Professor Kalam, Professor S.P. Roy, and Professor R.P. Mitra. You want to take the questions they're going to raise together, or would like to answer them separately?
No, one by one. I have a mental meltdown. I don't think I should take questions in series.
Okay, Professor Roy, you've been waiting for a long time. All yours, sir. But please make it brief so that we can conclude by 8:30, 8:40. I don't want to delay people's dinner. Roy? Professor S.P. Roy? Are you there, Professor Roy? Yeah.
Okay. Namaskar. First of all, most admiring deliberation I heard. As a student of anthropology, I would like to share 2 points. How in the same ecological setup, same island, same landscape, migratory population coming from different cultural background practice subsistence pattern following their own culture. As a student of anthropology, I'll say 2 examples. In Andaman Island, Middle Andaman near Mayabandar, the Karens were brought by the Britishers in 1920, and after independence, Bengali settler and Keralite. In the same island, I was surprised to see the Karens had made their house on pole, on platform, like in Northeast. And the Bengali people of the mud wall and with the thatch. So I was very surprised. I asked them, why you are making a house on the pole? They said they have come from Burma, Myanmar. There was flooded area. So from the childhood, they are used to have the houses on the poles. And the Bengali, they had a different material culture of this. Even the food pattern and also about the dress and worshipping pattern. So this is in same island, people how they carry because of the social capital and ethos. So this is one interesting thing I found, which I will supplement about his observation. And in the Port Blair, the main capital of the Port Blair, Ireland, look at the penal settlements, the local, we call it local, those were brought by the Britishers as a penal, and after freedom, they were allowed to settle in Port Blair around. So all those settlers, it is known as a local, this population known as local, they had come from different parts of the country. And since they were pre-independence living in the jail, they had forgotten their language, religion, they married themselves. And interestingly, even the names are also exchanged. So they had developed a common pattern of culture and name also. This is another. Third one, after independence, people came from different parts of the country for different jobs. So in the same Port Blair, those who came after independence, they could not forget their language, religion. So in the Port Blair, if Vijay remembers, Hindi Sahitya, Bengali Club, Keralite Samaj, Tamil Nadu. So their food, culture, dress, and religion were practiced in the same Port Blair for those who had gone as a well-placed. So under the panel settlement, people like a melting pot, they forget. And those who had the choices, they remain their culture. So very interesting anthropological study, how the cultural trait and practice, how which population has faster acculturation, which population hold it. This is very, very important. Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Thank you, Professor Roy.
Yeah.
Identity assertion is a very complex process, and saying there is a melting pot of races which United States of America claimed for a long time is a very false notion. It's been proven beyond a point that that doesn't really happen, whatever economic or other the reasons of prosperity are there. Kalam, would you like to respond to Professor?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for the exposition. We have had projects done in Andamans from the Department of Anthropology in Madras University. We have also had students doing fieldwork in Andamans, and I have been to some of the places that you're talking about. I just have, I accept what all you have said in terms of the exposition, except to say that I have reservations about the term melting pot. At best, it's a salad bowl. And when people talked about the melting bowl, it was only the pot that melted, not the contents which were there. So that's just the point that made. But then also look at the Romanis, who are known as the Gypsies. They have been away from India for centuries, and they still retain quite a lot in terms of the language and other things which they have. Therefore, it's not a surprising thing that people coexist in a place, but they hold on to the thing. Acculturation does happen in terms of intro-borrowing, but then what is strong as an institution amongst you, you try to retain that. For instance, language, food habit, religion, do not. Food habits may change because of ecology. Language and religion you hold on for a long time. And the best example is the Romanis or the Gypsies which are there. But then this melting pot thing, I think we need to be very careful about talking about it. Even in the United States, with the earlier sociologists talk about melting pot, they found out that at best is a salad bowl. And now even that's being questioned.
Yeah, Bali is another classic example where Hindu culture and traditions have sustained and survived. Sorry, not my call to interrupt. Professor Mitra, all yours, please.
Yeah, wonderful lecture, sir. You know, there are 2 points which I find little difficult to reconcile in your lecture. The first point which you mentioned was that how in the United States the phenotypic differences made it very difficult to be anonymous for the Black people to escape the discrimination. And you know, it was so pervasive. But in context of Dalits, primarily in India, also of Jews, it was not the phenotypical difference which was at play. The discrimination here came from something else, right? So wasn't it in this entire so many years of experience easy for people to, you know, by changing their names, by changing their localities, by migrating, to come out of this kind of discrimination? And, you know, in another point of the lecture, while quoting Isabella Wilkerson, you said that the caste or Dalit discrimination is much more molecular based than compared.
I never said that. I never said that.
You know,
the word molecular I never used when I was talking about the Dalits.
No, molecular, not in terms of biological molecular.
And don't mix up things. Don't mix up things. Just say what I said.
Okay, let me say that the discrimination was much more widespread. The discrimination was much more strong, and if I may use the word, it was more social molecular. And
you are using the word molecular now. Don't attribute it to me.
Okay, so Wilkerson perhaps may have used it, the word.
She has not, and I have never said that.
No, she has used the term.
Where?
You know,
Where?
She has used the term, sir.
Not in terms of the Dalits. She has not used the term. Okay.
No, she has called it the discrimination mole infrastructure.
Fine. Your reading is different from mine. Go ahead.
Correct. Or let me come to my
What's
question.
your question? What's your question?
My question is, how do you attribute that without these phenotypical differences and the possibility of being anonymous, the system continued for so long?
Okay, number one, you said that in the context of America about the blacks, I said that they don't have anonymity. They don't have, in fact, because of the fact that they're black, wherever they are, irrespective of they're in a mosque or they're in a temple or they're in a church, they're blacks. Okay.
Yes.
There's no further point on that.
They cannot escape because of their skin color.
You have made your point. Now, would you listen to what I'm saying?
Sure.
Okay, about the American situation, there's no dispute at all. The point was simple, that whereas the others can escape because of the physical presence that they have, the blacks don't have that option. Okay,
yes,
as simple as that. Secondly, about the Dalits, in spite of the fact that I have a social molecular, I've never used the word social molecular or anything. Whatever Bill says and his son is different for you, different for me, I have never made that point. Okay, now why the discrimination against the Dalits? I was not talking about that. Everybody should know why the Dalits are discriminated. What I was trying to point out when I compared the American situation with the German and the Indian state was, if people in India, the Dalits go away 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers from where they were born or where they were lived, they have anonymity. The same thing happens to Jews. Unless their name or somebody knows that they're a Jew, they have anonymity. Simple. That's about it. Don't put in all kinds of things into my thing. Say that you said this, you said this. There are so many others who have listened to me.
Okay. Let me.
No, that's enough. There are others, I believe.
If you just answer one question, were there non-visible surveillance method which was much more stronger than the phenotypic differences visible in the cases of race in America when you are talking about Dalit?
The American situation was based completely on race. I am not using it in terms of the biological thing. I'm talking about in the social sense. The whole thing was based on race. Simple. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ram. Anybody else? Any other questions from the audience?
I'm Professor Somshikrappa.
Yes, sir, please.
Let
May
us see
I have-
you here. Somashakar.
Sir, sorry, I joined midway.
No,
It was
that
really-
doesn't matter, but we want to see you.
Oh,
Please
Fine,
switch off
sir.
your camera.
yeah. Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
It was very interesting indeed. Sir, I have, in fact, since I joined midway, I do not know whether you could cover an issue, which of course I am very particular in knowing about. Migration is as old as that of human civilization. It's not a very new, say, phenomenon or new practice in the human world. My say interest here is to know from your side that are there any, say, concrete studies to establish the patterns of international migration? Why? Because it's not that, say, every part of the world has received so many people, like certain areas, like what, of course, you have been referring to America, etc., etc. So keeping that in view and also taking other things, say, into consideration, can we make out as to say in which geographical part of the world the migration has been pronounced, was pronounced, and has been pronounced?
Yeah. In fact, I talked about that when I was talking about
Okay.
agriculture, where I said that wherever cereal production was happening agriculturally, those are the areas where then, if you want just one single work, I would recommend read Early Indians by Tony Joseph. That will answer most of the questions in terms of why certain places have been more populated than the others. That's a very good work. And this will answer many of the questions that you have. So that's a very nice thing. And the other one, I also talked about it before I went over to the other thing. I don't know if you are there. The second book I would recommend is a compilation of nearly 100 articles edited by my friends Ganesh Devi, Corey Shetter, and also Tony Joseph. And this is known as The Indians. And Professor Subhash Valimbe is one of the contributors to that, who is here today with us. So these two works will answer most of your questions which are there in terms of how human populations, how humans populated different parts of the world, why in certain places density is higher and why in some certain places density is low, and timing, for instance. As I said, the North Americans from Alaska, they went about 16,000, 17,000 years back. And then by the time they went over to Latin America, at that time it was only South America, was about 1,000 odd years later. So the movement was very slow. So these two works are very good. And in addition, you want to add up quite a lot of other things, then Isabel Wilkerson. And people are attributing all kinds of things to her, but then do your own judgment by reading that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Dr. Lamba, and then maybe one last question if anybody else has, then it's time to.
Professor Mehta, from my side, there's no time constraint. Okay. So it depends on other people's hunger pangs.
Yes. Dr. Lamba, please.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, sir, for a very, very engrossing talk. It was just wonderful. I have one small little question, sir. I'm not having much exposure in this area of work, but the political aspect. With the blacks, we've had a lot of movements on apartheid and anti-discrimination happening, and which took up even up to a violent sort of a facet. Then with the Dalits, there has been another political form. Do you agree that these, sort of groups or are migrants, which ultimately, for maybe establishing their identity rather than working against discrimination, do you think there is such a nexus happening anywhere in the world?
I'm sorry, I got that first part right about the Dalits and the blacks, but then last part, can you just elaborate on that?
I'm basically interested in knowing the political nexus that forms. With the Dalits, there's a whole different, miasma that happened, that it was not so much about rights and about representation. But now when it comes to politics, the Dalits are a very strong group.
Yes.
Is that with the blacks, we haven't seen such a thing? Or do you think that there is something like that there as well?
No, in their own way, the blacks have also done quite a lot, in fact, and the whole, I will come to this, the Black Panther movement, for instance, was something which was very important. And then when Muhammad Ali, who was earlier known as Cassius Clay, questioned some of the things which are happening, and then he threw his gold medal from the river, 1960 heavyweight gold medal, and then he refused to get drafted. In fact, there have been lots of movements among the blacks, and Louis Farrakhan, the Million Man March, which happened in 1995-96 in Washington, D.C., Louis Farrakhan, okay, and the followers. There have been, in fact, in 1971-72, when the Dalits in Maharashtra took up an epithet called the Dalit Panthers, it was a complete takeover from the Black Panther movement, which was there in America. Therefore, to say that politically Indians, but then the problem with what happens in America is again the color factor. See, what happens is in India, suppose even in Bombay, for instance, if a Dalit does certain things and is away in the town, or there is some incident happening, is good in India that up to the sub-inspector or circle inspector level, nobody carries an arm in India. In the United States, where I have lived for quite some time, in fact, the lowest kind of police person who is there has gun. Okay. And the moment they see a black, the first thing they do is shoot. Okay. Therefore, the blacks have done something. The black movements and the other things which have happened quite strongly. And Martin Luther King and the others brought up quite a lot. Now his son and Jesse Jackson, who died only yesterday, I think. They have done a lot, in fact, to say, I would say that the black movement has been quite strong politically, and they have made strong points there in the United States. And in fact, many of the things happening in India, they borrowed from that. And it's good that the political mobilization which has happened is coming out. The other point I would like to mention is that till about when I started my research in 1973, if I wanted to read something on Ambedkar, it was very, very difficult to get anything. The publishers were some unknown people somewhere. And if you wanted to read Annihilation of Caste, you knew that it was there, but then it's not. During the 80s and 90s, for instance, the kind of political movement which was so strong has brought in. Now, Westland Books is giving you 6 books of Ambedkar together as a package. Therefore, quite a lot has happened, and for the good, for instance, in terms of fighting the discrimination which is there. And this is something which augurs well, hopefully, for the others also. But then I'm quite conscious, having lived there, about the black movements and other things which have happened, and they're quite significant. We cannot compare one to one, because the Dalit situation, as I said, because of the fact that they can be anonymous, sometimes they just forego certain things which are happening and don't make a point about it. Suppose somebody is sitting next to a person in Bombay who is a Dalit, and the person doesn't feel anything sitting next to that, or sitting in a restaurant, going to a movie, taking a bus or something. You are lonely in a crowd. Okay. But then in the US situation, as I said, 24/7, because of the fact that you get identified by the blacks, the movement and resistance to that has been much higher. I mean, difficult to compare by saying higher or not, has been there, I would say.
Yeah, even after the Houston killing, the Black Panthers was a very strong moment. Professor J.R. God, please.
Good evening to you all, sirs and madams. I am more a forensic scientist turned from an anthropologist, but I would say and thank Dr. Kalam for his excellent talk. And sir, I would say your knowledge has no bounds, and I had an opportunity to, you can say, learn a lot of things from you today. And your knowledge of the whole of the world and about anthropology is self-explanatory, that you have had very deep studies in anthropology. Thank you so much, sir. And
Professor Mehta, there is a request. There's a request from one of the persons who has joined us says a couple of things about the Romas. Okay, now I would just take 1 minute to say the Romas were the people who migrated from India, from the Gujarat, Rajasthan coast centuries back. But then they have spread out to different parts of the United States, I mean, different parts in Europe. And there they are mostly known as gypsies, which is a derogatory or pejorative kind of a term, which is there. But then the Romas. But one of the most interesting things is that they have retained quite a lot of things in their language and kinship terminology. Now, what happens to people when they acculturate with another culture is that things which are there in that culture where they're living, the newer places, they adopt the words for that. But then the things which are peculiar to yourself and considered part of only your culture and not the larger culture, you retain terms for that. For instance, kinship terminology. It doesn't influence somebody else's kinship terminology to you. You retain that. Therefore, the Romas have written quite a lot. But I think one of the saddest things which has happened, some movies, I think some very good movies have been made on the Romas, and the discrimination which they face in different parts of Europe. And therefore, they're not a settled kind of a thing. They're semi-nomadic. They keep moving from place to place. And their life is also quite difficult, even today in parts of Europe where they are. And you don't expect in the 21st century to people have those kind of difficulties in their personal life and into personal relations with the larger society. But it's a fact that the Romas suffer quite a lot even today. Thank you.
Yeah. You want to frame a question, Professor Gore, or just wanted to compliment him? Professor Gore? You were asking a question?
No, madam, I was not asking question.
You would only take it.
All right. I just wanted to appreciate Professor Kalam for his marvelous talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's always a pleasure listening. If there are no other questions, may I, Professor Kalam, as usual, there are so many insights. Cultural diversity and social diversity, and about the populations or the people who migrate and how it gets confused is altogether in another issue. So maybe we should invite you another time to discuss those areas of migration as to what happened to people's identities, cultures, practices, because Professor Devi's concern is primarily on those issues, the conservation and preservation of linguistic diversities. To say the least, the last points that you raised, I was just reminded of Sanjay Baru's book, recent publication, where he's taken up some of these issues and talks about why so many Indians migrate and question some of the government policies which encourage people to move out of the country. Amitabh Ghosh you referred to, he is one of my favorite authors, and I've read each of his books. If there are younger scholars sitting here, I think there are lots of lessons to learn from here. That the list of books that Professor Kalam has provided, they must read them. There is so much plethora of information that guides the theories that we formulate today. In fact, you may not agree with everything, may differ, but then to argue and to debate is very important in any kind of lecture. He didn't want it to be a monologue, and it has turned out to be a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much once again, and thank you, Professor Gregory and Professor Bera, who for some reason wasn't able to chair today's session, for giving me this opportunity to be here. I must apologize because I would have loved to continue, but for the fact that early morning tomorrow I have to travel back to Chandigarh, and I'm still physically struggling with some of my health concerns. Professor Gregory, all yours, please, for the concluding remarks. Professor Gregory, are you there?
Thank you very much, Professor Shalina Mehta. for chairing this session excellently and moderating the session with full academic vigor. I should thank Professor Kalam. As we conclude this deeply thought-provoking lecture, we are grateful to Professor M.A. Kalam for guiding us across vast intellectual terrains, truly embodying the spirit of shifting horizons. He has reminded us that anthropology today is enriched by powerful new tools such as genomics and paleogenetics, which have reaffirmed Africa as the cradle of humankind and revealed our shared ancestry through successive waves of migration over nearly 70,000 years. By integrating archaeology, genetics, and linguistics, Professor Kalam has demonstrated that human history is not a story of isolated civilizations, but encounter, adaptation, and admixture. Through his comparative reflections on India, Germany, and the United States, Professor Kalam sensitively examined how migration can give rise to exclusion, discrimination, and hierarchy, whether shaped by caste, religion, or race. At the same time, he reminded us that beneath visible differences lies a profound biological interconnectedness. His reflections on concepts such as diaspora, NRI, and OCI further challenged us to use our terms carefully and analytically. Above all, Professor Kalam, your lecture has reinforced a central anthropological truth. Humanity is one, though expressed in remarkable diversity. It is our responsibility as scholars to sustain dialogue, question assumptions, and build bridges across differences. Thank you, Professor Kalam, for this enlightening and inspiring address.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
I should also thank, I already thanked Professor Shalina, wonderfully done, and taking your time in spite of your, I know how busy you are now. And I should also thank all those who participated in paying tributes, particularly Professor R.P. Mitra, Professor Sardak, Dr. Lalit Kumar, Professor Vijay Sagai, Dr. Sashi Kumar, and Dr. Sini. And all those who participated in the discussion made the lecture very live, including Professor Vijay Sagai, Professor Walimbe, Professor S.B. Roy, Professor R.P. Mitra, Professor Somashekarappa, my old friend, Dr. Rajini Lamba, Dr. J.R. Gaur. And there are many senior people who were present in this lecture and in this tribute, this paying tributes session, including Professor Chellaperumal, Professor Anil Kumar, Professor Vijay Prakash, Professor Ranjana Roy, Professor S.B. Roy, Professor Ranju Azni, Professor Venkat Rao, Professor Mitashri Mitra. So I am, and all those who have been present here and made this occasion a very significant one. Thank you very much. And once again, and I just to remind you that we are moving forward with the preparation of organizing the World Anthropology Congress at Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences between 18th and 22nd November 2026. And this lecture was part of that preparation, where this was the second distinguished invited lecture. And we will be having many more lectures in the days to come. I expect all of you to be part of this process. And thank you very much once again, and good night. Thank you.